All right, Brooke, good afternoon. How's it going?
Conrad, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Obviously, this will come out a little bit later, but I had to watch the Yankees lose the World Series the other day, which just puts a smile on my face as a Red Sox fan. If my team can't win, I at least want to see my enemy lose. You know what I mean? That's my take on it.
My wife and I were actually saying the same thing. So I hope our guest today is not a Yankees fan because we were celebrating as well. So.
Yeah. It's that's kind of my take on life in general. Is like, well, I want to win, but if I can't, I at least can take some pleasure in the other one. And I can still root for Mookie Betts a little bit. I don't feel terrible about rooting for him. It's not his fault he got traded. That's a different discussion for a different day. But Andrew, welcome. Excited to have you here with us today. We'd love to hear a little bit about you, your background, Joseph Ellen Properties, how that came to be, and then we'd also love to realize or for you to explain how you originally connected with Brooke and Vintory and the whole team over here.
Absolutely. And first off, thank you for having me on. This is super exciting. I think this is so valuable because I've had so many mistakes, that have kind of helped us grow to, what our business is today, but there's no manual or guide for this stuff or anything within this business. So it really is tough to find resources. And I think even just reading everyone else's stories, it's been such a big value add, for my business alone. But I guess as far as our story, man, it's been a grind. So to take you way back, we, my wife and myself, we bought our first rental properties in 2019. They were long-term rentals. So I was a sales manager at a software company, and then she actually worked for a commercial broker who had commercial properties in Flagler County here in Florida, and then also back in St. Louis, where we're from. We came to visit one time. This was, I think, right before COVID. So we were just doing long-term stuff at that point. We actually stayed at one of his beachfront homes. And it was a beautiful house, but the experience was not too great. It was managed by a company that has thousands and thousands of properties. So funny enough, she actually reached out to her boss at the time who owned the property. And she was explaining all this stuff. What was wrong with the house? It's beautiful. Thank you so much for staying. But you probably as an owner, want to know about some of these things. And then he was like, you manage my commercial properties. You guys should just start a vacation rental management company. So we kind of did on a whim. And I think we got our first management contract in June of 2021. So we sold all of our long-term rentals in St. Louis. We kind of reallocated the capital to Northeast Florida here and bought a couple properties and just kind of like used our properties as a test subject. And we had to start small. It's kind of like, as you know, fake it till you make it until you get a little bit larger. So we built out the brand and we would approach people and we would say, yeah, we manage a handful of vacation rentals and, here's the collateral on us and we'd love to help. In all reality, it was our properties that we were managing, but that kind of snowballed and it started property after property. And we really poured some gasoline on what we were doing and growing our brand and, growing our company here in Northeast Florida. So that's what it is today. And then my wife also owns a design company. So we kind of do everything a la carte. Like we'll help people find the property. We design it, we rehab it, we manage it on the back end. And then that is Joseph Ellen Properties. And I think how we met, Brooke, was, just knowing people within the network. So I think I had probably reached out for advice or something like that via a DM on LinkedIn. And then we were able to connect and you asked me to be a part of a couple things. And here we are. That's kind of the beauty of this industry that I've noticed just from my short time in it is everybody is so willing to help and not like hold secrets, close to the vest. They share what they've went through. And I think that's why, something like this book is so cool. You can see everybody else's mistakes.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, this industry, there's something about it where everyone helps each other out, for the most part. I think 98% of the industry, everybody's willing to help. And it's like the more you give, the more you get. And I'm hoping that, by everyone sharing their mistakes in this book, there's a lot of value add for everybody.
I got plenty of them, so we could probably go for a couple hours.
Real quick, Andrew, this is just my own curiosity out of anything. Your name is not Joseph or Ellen. It doesn't appear to be your wife's name either. What's the origin of the name? How'd the name come to be of the company?
Very common question. So the name is actually our middle names put together. That was kind of as creative as we could get at the time. So it's turned out well so far, so we're probably going to stick with it.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was like some character, like some silent investor, Joseph Ellen, and he's the billionaire or something. Yeah.
I wish it was something cool like that, but no, we were just thinking one day and we really couldn't come up with any names, and that was what we landed on. So the creativity was low at that time.
I think you create like an alter ego, of Joseph Ellen. Like, he's the rich billionaire that funded it.
Hey, we'll go with it. If that's what people believe.
It's almost like Charlie's Angels, where like he's behind a speaker box. He never doesn't actually exist. It's just like a different thing.
But Conrad, just to give you an idea, I mean, Andrew's only been around for like 3 years, a little over 3 years. And I mean, I'm looking at your website now, Andrew, you got close to 180 properties. I mean, that's a pretty nice run, 180 properties in 3 years. And you've got some awesome inventory too. It's not schlep inventory for sure.
Yeah. And I think we're just getting started. But that's why something like this is so cool, because you definitely know from personal experience, but whenever you're growing that quickly, you have to fail so fast. So all of the stuff that people are saying in the top 10 mistakes and what they would go back and change, like I just lived those things not too long ago. So it's really cool to see what other people are doing, because it's almost like in this business, whenever you're starting a company, you feel on an island until you get other people within your network that can get you from A to B a little bit quicker.
Yeah. And also those early properties are much harder to grow. I remember when I started Vantage, the early days, like that first year, I was just on the phone with somebody and I was explaining, man, that first year, like I think I barely struggled to get like 18 properties, but then it snowballs from there because nobody wants to be the early, adopter. Nobody wants to be the guinea pig. But like once you got to like the scale you're at right now, I mean, I don't see any reason why you guys shouldn't be doubling your business every year.
Absolutely. That's the hopes.
That's why you signed up with Vintory too, right?
Exactly. It's the perfect partnership. You're absolutely right.
All right, Conrad, let's take it away. Sorry to take you off schedule there.
No, I think it's good. I think it's good to set the context and the stage a little bit. But I'll dive in, Andrew, with some of these mistakes, and we'll dive through them, and you can give me some extra flavor, extra context on top of it. So, number one, keep plenty of cash reserves, plan ahead, and set money aside for when things go south in the business, or you're prepared to weather the storm. So, I think the obvious example that I could point out as a question, that hurricane kind of swiped underneath you, is my understanding of, maybe about a few weeks ago, almost a month ago now. Those things happen, but maybe just your broader experience here on like what is an appropriate level of cash reserves for your company as you've gotten bigger and grown.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most important thing. And I can just speak for ourselves. Being in business for 4 years, we haven't had a company for 15, 20 to 30 years where everything is built up. So all the cash that's coming in and all the cash that's going out is super important. Like we have to count every single dime because we have to be mindful of the goals that we're trying to hit. So like budgets are great, projecting is great. But especially in this business, like the transactions get so big, and that's why it's important to have like a bookkeeper and be on top of your financials and making sure you have the cash. And just one example is like the situation we're in now. So whenever, probably about 2.5 years ago, it was extremely easy for us to pick up inventory in this business. Revenue is high. Now it's a little bit different. It's almost like our real estate agent relationships have kind of dried up because rates are extremely high, property insurance is high, and they're just not selling anything. So a lot of our inventory is coming from just like working long-term relationships. But it's because we have cash and we're able to do that stuff, because that smaller company that isn't mindful of their cash reserves in a time like this where we have an opportunity to get market share, they're not spending anything on marketing. So I think it's really important for a business, of our size under 5 years to be mindful of how much cash that we have, because not only to be protected with your employees and making sure you make payroll, but also for opportunities. Like when can we put the gas pedal on whenever we need to do more marketing, when everybody else isn't bringing on a ton of properties? It's our opportunity to kind of get a little bit of market share.
Yeah, I mean, this is one. It's sometimes this one's challenging because it's easier said than done, especially in the early days when you really just you're struggling to rub a couple of nickels together to do it. But I mean, to kind of have that profits first mentality where you're setting aside some money to do that for that rainy day is definitely something that's great advice. Because look, here's the only thing that's for certain is like, there's always going to be some kind of a black swan type event. I've talked about this before. You look back at 9/11. You look at the great financial crisis in 07, 08. You look at COVID. Like, who would ever predicted these things? It's like the only thing for certain is every 7 to 12 years, there is a black swan type of event. And that's not counting like the local, catastrophes. That's not counting like the fires in Maui. That's not counting the floods in Asheville. So the only thing for certain is something is going to happen. So you might as well budget for it in advance.
Yeah, and it's our obligation to be prepared, like as a business owner. And this is something that's relatively new, but there's so many people depending on us, like within our team. So to not to be completely dialed in with financials or cash reserves, like we have 10 in-house employees, we have 30 cleaning teams, we have 4 maintenance teams, we have a team of 5 property inspectors that go out and just walk every single home before a guest arrives. We got to pay all of those people, and they're relying on us as a business owner to make sure that they get paid every single Friday whenever we do payroll. So I think it's imperative to have cash on hand if you want to grow at all, because you really never know what's going to happen in this business.
Mm. Is there some formula that you've come to, Andrew, as far as like your expenses, times 6, like maybe having 6 months of what your expenses are, and do you rebalance? And I ask that because my personal experience with my own business is that I had a number in mind, and then my business grew and I didn't adjust my number. So I was like, what was once a reasonable amount of cash to have just sitting in the, the checking account, the bank account, so to speak, for my business became very out of whack once their expenses went up. And I was like, ooh, that's no longer is that the appropriate amount of money. I had to go in and really try to build it up over a handful of months and try to get in a better spot. Have you done anything in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, we generally have 4 to 5 months on hand just because we never know what's going to happen. But I will say, like, I'm not naive in saying that we haven't been in business for 15 or 20 years. So we're learning everything for the first time. So whenever we get to 200 properties, that's going to be the first time. Whenever we get to 300, that's going to be the first time. And then we're going to have a different balance of payroll every, time that we grow. So all of it's new. And I think that's why it's even more important to like have conversations like this and reach out to people within the industry and do the masterminds, because everybody's going through the exact same thing. But yeah, and I also have the mindset of, I'm sure a lot of business owners do, but like, I feel like I've built it. Like, what if it goes away tomorrow? So maybe I'm a little bit less aggressive with, marketing and spending, because I do like to save a little bit more, but I think that's more of a mindset thing for me.
Yeah. I think you could ask different people, get different opinions on that, right?
Yep.
Like, I've been in companies before where the owner thought that it was his money too, and I was like, once I started my own business, I always thought like I divorced that idea of like it's the company's money. I own the company, yes, but it's not all my money, and I think that's like a healthy mindset thing for sure on that side of it. But
absolutely.
Yeah. Number 2 then, Brooke, boy, this one came up a lot, didn't it? The term fire quickly applies to owners as well, not letting root owners ruin the synergy of your team. I feel like, Andrew, we've all, heard these stories in the podcast a little bit so far, but what's kind of your like bad owner story, if you want to let loose for a minute on that? What's kind of that? So,
oh my gosh. I feel like we have such great relationships with our owners, like, especially because we're big enough to where we have a ton of resources, but we're also small enough to where like I have every conversation. We're in group chats with our owners, but that doesn't mean that we haven't got people that are challenging, to say the least. I mean, we've had owners take us to small claims courts. Like, we've kind of been through all of that stuff. And I think that's just part of the business, because it's kind of similar to a guest. Like, we can put out incredible product. We can be super respectful, but we can't please everyone. Like, we don't mesh with every single personality. And that's something that I've learned over time. And you guys know, whenever you're starting a business, you take what you can get. So you almost get beat up a little bit just to have revenue coming in, because I got to make payroll. I got to grow. Like, I can't afford, I'll let this person be rude to me for the time being because I got to make sure I can pay for everything, until you get to a point. I think we're super fortunate now to where we can hand select owners. So like, the best advice I could give is, try to push through it, because it's going to happen. Like, it's inevitable in the beginning of a business, especially when you have to take on what you can take on. But you'll get to a point where you have a brand where you can be selective. And that's such a beautiful day to get to, whenever someone is being rude to you or your team, or maybe there's poor expectations. And then it's just not a good fit, and it's not going to affect your business too much. Because I think it's a partnership on both ends. Like, we're also interviewing that person as they're interviewing us. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could have, Andrew, written an entire book just on this topic, because it was the one that came up, I think, most popular. You're absolutely right. You nailed it. There was that great point in time when I remember I said, you know what, I've had enough of this guy and I'm going to fire him. But in the beginning, like, you just take those lumps, man. You just take those like knocks on the chin, because you have to in the early days. Like, you know what I mean? You're struggling. Like, one property, especially most of the time I found it's usually a really, really good property too, where they're jerks. You just got to suck it up. But there's nothing is more refreshing than when you can say, you know what, we're not going to renew your contract, or we're going to, ask you to leave. This came up, like I said, a ton. CJ Stam talked about almost exactly what you said. He said one of his greatest regrets was allowing toxic owners to steal energy from my employees. And then Jody Taylor Rafosco said, do not wait too long to fire an owner. If you're feeling frustrated with them, so your employees. If anyone is badgering your staff and has unrealistic expectations, cut them loose. You are better off, and they may be too. Because there's just nothing worse than having, think about the stress that your team is under, and they have that, that they have to regret that one call that they have to make to that one jerk owner. They got to call him back. It's just not worth losing your team, because your team is really that most valuable asset. And I've seen people quit over these kind of things. So make sure you get rid of them and cut them loose. But if it's hard in the early days, make sure you do it earlier than later.
I think the team is the most important part. So up to 100 properties, Melody and myself, that's my wife, we were kind of running everything ourselves, because you don't always have enough money to then hire on staff. But I think it's whenever we got to a point where we were big enough to where we had property managers, we had quality managers, and then owners would be rude to them or give them a hard time. And just seeing like how it would affect them on a daily basis, it's like you're just not thinking about yourself anymore, because someone can talk bad to me all day and it's not going to faze me. I mean, in this business, like you have such tough skin, but not everybody is the same. So once it starts to affect your team, I think that's when you really need to start pulling the trigger.
Yeah. I think the example I've given Brooke before when we talked about this topic, I don't know if this has happened to you, Andrew, is you fired that bad owner and your team is celebrating. Like I had a situation a little while ago where I fired someone and kind of let them go. And they were like, my team was so happy. They're like, oh, great, I don't have to deal with person ABC anymore. And I was like, oh, that tells me how overdue it was, right? Because they were like celebrating and like trying to figure out, hey, could we like, do something special to like, could we burn like a piece of paper with his name on it or something because they hated him so much? And
it's a breath of fresh air. And then, from that, they're going to start working harder. They're more bought into the company because you have to stand up for them sometimes. Like if you just continue to get stepped on by owners, that's something that I've learned is you lose a little respect from your team. And, if they're not working hard and happy, then you're kind of shit out of luck.
Yeah, it's sort of this, downward spiral back to Brooks' comment from a second ago. I'm with you on that one for sure. You touched on this one. I may combine 3 and 4 here a little bit, just because I think they kind of go down this same path or the same thread. So number 3 is about paying a high quality bookkeeper, having, that accounting understanding. Maybe we could talk about that. But then your 4th one, Andrew, is not implementing profit first methodology. So maybe talk about those 2 things combined if you're okay with it. What does a high quality bookkeeper actually do for you? And what is the profit first methodology and how do you use it in your business?
Yeah, reading that book was a game changer for me. And I think it was a different stage that we got to in our business, because very similar where I was kind of talking about up to 100 properties. My wife and myself ran a lot, but once you get to a certain size, there's so many transactions coming in. And then you also have other people that you're responsible for. You have to budget. We kind of talked about the cash reserves, like that's super important as well. And I remember there was times when we had first started and we were starting to take on a lot of properties. And we were like, okay, there's a lot of cash coming in, but like, where the hell is it going every single month? Because I didn't know where it was going. And then I finally read that book. I think it was probably a recommendation to me by somebody in our network. And it was just like such a game changer. Even, being able to pay us first and being able to break, every category down into different bank accounts and keep things organized. Like that was just the bare bones foundation. But it was a game changer for us because we needed to know where we were financially. Like we can't grow, we can't hire, we don't know how many properties we can bring on if we don't like know where the money's going. So that was really huge for us. And then whenever it comes to a bookkeeper, I mean, this is something that we're always working on. But I don't recommend doing the bookkeeping yourself. Hire someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Because again, in this business, I mean, we've had people that we've hired as far as CPAs and bookkeepers that don't know anything about vacation rentals. They've worked with us for 3 or 4 months and they're just like, I can't do it anymore. Like there's too many transactions to do the reconciling. Like it's not a good fit. And then we're kind of held up high and dry. So whenever we found a solid bookkeeper, it kind of changed a lot in our business because we knew we were at financially. So that was big for us.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's if you can set up your accounting straight from the beginning, like that is so much easier. But the problem is, like my first accountant didn't know anything about, vacation rentals. Like she had no idea how to do that. So if you can find a firm out there or find somebody like a consultant that specializes in short-term rentals and accounting, go to them first because they're going to set up that chart of accounts. It's so much cleaner, so much easier. And like to your point, Joseph or Andrew, it's going to be so much easier to kind of bucket it in those buckets from the get-go. And again, once you have to go back and recast everything, it's just such a pain. I mean, but this did come up a lot too as well. And I think Jason Sprinkle said the same thing when he was with 360 Blue. He's like, we waited too long to get a strong accounting team in place. It's not something you want to go back and try to clean up. It's the foundation of your data-driven metrics right out of the gate. Your financials tell you what's working and what's not. Even when you're small, you need a great set of books. Start with great accounting. So if you can find somebody out there, and I'm sure Conrad, we can put some stuff in the show notes of some recommendations, but get somebody to kind of set that up right out of the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, because even the small margins, they make such a big difference in our business. $10 here and $15 there. Like whenever we broke it down and looked at the stuff that was being missed, I mean, I'll be honest, there was a couple months, probably 2 years ago, where I was like, gosh, we're making like 60, 70 grand a month. But then we were losing like 10 in all reality. And it just kind of like blew my mind that we actually got somebody in that knew some of the finances and accounting. And it could be the difference of hiring a new employee or, doing a different marketing campaign for your business. I mean, there's probably 2 or 3 grand in almost every business that's just hiding because the accounting's not done correctly.
Shout out to Jen Ford, by the way. She used to be, I think, the CFO, if I'm not mistaken, for Turnkey. This is what she does. She's a consultant for CEOs, and she really is like at a very strategic level. She does a fantastic job. But then there's obviously also some other firms out there that do it at a more, just the smaller firms rather than just that side.
Yeah. I get those expenses. I always think, Andrew, it's kind of like an airplane that's like 1 or 2 degrees off. I don't know if you've seen this before, where it's like if you leave Seattle and you're trying to go to New York City and you're 2 degrees off, you end up in Miami or something like that. So that's kind of how I feel. Is like as you get bigger, it's like doing 1 or 2 things wrong, it just exacerbates itself, unfortunately, over time.
That's the perfect example. I mean, $10 here and there adds up extremely quickly in this business. So
especially when you're doing like 5,000 transactions, like you guys probably are.
Yeah.
It's
a
lot.
Mistake or something like that can make a big difference. No. Well, number 5 then, I think, again, kind of dovetails in the same concept of team and building out the right structure. And number 5, Andrew, you talked about delegating. So delegate sooner. Don't make the mistake of thinking that you have to do everything yourself. If trained properly, sometimes the team is actually better equipped than you to actually do some of those things in the business. So you mentioned this idea early on of like you and your wife, Melody, being the main ones from 0 to 100. When you started to delegate and hire, you mentioned bookkeeping. Are there other areas that come to mind outside of that you have now kind of assigned down to other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is we had to do that to get our sanity back. Like it was tough, like the first 2 years of us doing everything. And I think as a new business owner, you get into the mindset of, like, screw it, I'm just going to do it myself, or nobody's going to do it like I can do it. I will say now that we started to build out our team and get the right people in the right roles, like they are better at that job than I am. That's why they're in that role. And it's helped us kind of grow and scale. And, from a stress standpoint, like it's helped us stay super motivated, because there was a time where we were super burnt out. We're like, how are we going to do this? We have X amount of properties. We're doing everything ourselves. Like we're the only people that can do accounting. We're the only people that could do marketing or message guests back. When all reality, there's people that are better than that. So, just like building out our property management team was huge, and building all the SOPs for them so they have the accountability to kind of like own their little book of business, because we do our properties in zones, and that is like their business that they're running. Another really big one is, like property inspectors. We have a whole team of property inspectors that we give ongoing training with that are in-house with us. I think like, oh, well, I need to walk the property for it to be good before a guest arrives. That's not really how a business owner should be, using the best use of their time. That accounting, revenue management, like everything in our business, we're trying to systematize and put smarter people around us. And that's what I've kind of like learned is, I can only get it to so far. Like maybe it's 100, 150 properties, 175 properties. We kind of made it on grind and, having every sales conversation and getting out there and hustle. But the point where we started to delegate stuff out, like that is the actual foundation of a business.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be able to scale if you don't delegate. If you're the bottleneck, the business is going to stop at a certain point. And again, everyone ended up, mentioning the same thing here. I mean, there was people like Kirsten King said the same thing. She struggled with overseeing and having her hands in too many pots. There was not enough freedom to fail. Kevin Jones, formerly of Latitude 38, who's now actually Kirsten King's business partner, he said, in an effort not to fail, I tried to involve myself in all matters, know everything, be everywhere, and I forgot to trust the team. Set very clear roles and responsibilities, set expectations and goals, and then hold people accountable. You simply cannot do everything yourself. And then, various other people, Lance Stitcher, Jason Sprinkle. So again, this came up time and time again. It's a common thing that everyone kind of ran into.
It's like a light bulb thing that kind of went off with me. So, kind of reading more books and, seeing other leaders in the industry and people that are posting on social and growing cool companies that I follow and kind of pick what they're doing and bring it into our business. That's what they're doing. And it just kind of made sense. Like I don't need to do everything myself. And the stress levels went down. We started to grow more. We started to have less issues. And then people that were that personality type, they went into that role. And it made so much more sense, because whenever you think of like myself, I'm very much vision. So like, I'm not going to be doing the detail stuff, but my wife is really good at detail. Our property managers are really good at detail. So the sooner I delegated that stuff out, my life as a business owner got drastically easier.
Yeah. I think I don't know exactly who told me this, but it was someone in our space told me this a while ago. It was like early on, you think you can find a clone of yourself. I don't know if you felt that way, Andrew, where it's like, well, if I just had two of me, I could do it all. You know what I mean? Like I just ran out of time in the day, or too much responsibility, that sort of thing. And I was like, well, I can't do that. I can't find anyone who's exactly like me. So what I did was like, but I can find someone who's good at me at one thing or two things that even I'm good at. And that's kind of what I learned over time. Is like I can't find one person to do everything. That doesn't exist. That's a unicorn. But I can find someone who's like just as good at SEO as I am, and like hire that person to just do that one thing. They may not be able to do all the other things, but that's okay. I don't need them to do all the other things. I can keep doing some of those things. So that was my journey over time, was like delegating each like piece of me into like a person. And then that's kind of what I've been able to replicate over time, is like giving away each of those concepts to a different individual. And then they excel and they, to your point, do a better job at it than I do nowadays, which is awesome.
Have either of you read the book, The E-Myth?
I have read that.
A long time ago. Yep.
But one of my greatest takeaways from that book I love is he said, design your company what it's going to be 5 years in advance, 10 years in advance, and build the org chart for that 5 to 10 years out. Now, here's what's going to happen. In the early days, you're going to have think of it like a sticky note. Like you have a sticky note on the wall for every position. Now, your name is going to be on probably 80% of those sticky notes. But what you're doing is over time is you're slowly removing yourself from each one of those sticky notes and putting somebody else's name on that role. But in the early days, you're doing every single one of those roles. All you're doing is you're just slowly picking it away. I love that, that metaphor, that framework to do that. And that's something I've done with all the businesses I've started.
Yeah, working with the Better Talent team helped us a ton with that whenever we were doing the personality test. Yep. So it was like, you're going to tell me that there's a certain role and there's a personality test that fits that role. And I was just like mind blown. So you don't want everyone that's just like myself? Well, no, we want people that are right for that specific role. And I think that's such a game changer in a business is getting the right people in the right seats and delegating stuff out.
Well, that's funny because you didn't actually have that on as one of your mistakes, as like hiring the wrong people and like leveraging psychometric personality assessment tools like Predictive Index that Steve uses over at Better Talent. But that's one that did definitely come up a lot.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, you mentioned Melody a few times, Andrew, so maybe we'll head in that direction because it sounds like you guys started this from the beginning. But number 6 is alignment with your spouse or partner is key in the early stages. This can certainly be a stressful business, so leaning on each other to excel. Was that always your vision? Had you guys worked together before, husband and wife duo, that sort of thing, or did that kind of come about organically? What's kind of the story there?
So we actually started the business when we were still dating. So that's always been kind of an interesting relationship. I will say
that could have gone sideways. You had a lot of confidence there, man. Wow.
There's a couple times that almost did go sideways, but I will say gosh, that put us in a really good position to learn each other and not to get too sappy, but whenever it came to husband and wife, we really had to learn how each other operated. Because we kind of we had the same vision, we had the same goal. Whenever we met, we were reading the same real estate book. So I was like, okay, that's cool. Maybe there's something here. And it's so neat because it's someone that's by your side, because this business is so stressful. And especially if an owner is yelling at you and maybe a property is getting switched to a long-term rental and then you have a guest saying something isn't perfect, to have that person that you can go home at night with and be almost complain back and forth to each other. But we had to learn each other. It was rough in the first 2 years because there's a certain switch that you need to turn off to be okay, you're my wife now. And then, okay, no, we need to switch it back and have a business related conversation because we're trying to hire somebody or we're covering payroll. So that was something that we have to learn. And this is such a perfect point to what we just spoke about with putting the right people in the right roles. She is COO, but that is not me. And I'm more CEO, vision. I'm let's acquire this company. Let's bring on, 15 more properties. And she's okay, we need to pay taxes. So you need to slow down a little bit. But once we kind of learned, what are our roles in the business? What are we good at? I stay out of her lane. She stays out of my lane and it's worked perfectly together. But that can go south very quickly. But I think you have to really respect that person. You have to find a new level of communication because it does get hard.
I don't know how you do it. I love my wife to death. We've been married for 25 years, but I do not think we could work together. I think in my early career, right out of college, I was in mortgage banking and she was actually in grad school. She's a speech pathologist and she was in grad school. So she, worked for me for a short period of time and it literally lasted a short period of time. So, she's very, very good at what she does, but I don't know if I could work with her, but It's
don't feel bad, Brooke. I got the same story basically. I thought my wife was transitioning out of something. This is when we started to really have our young kids at home, and so she was like, well, it doesn't really make sense for me to do that anymore. So I was like, all right, well, while the kids are sleeping, maybe you can do these little research tasks for me. And shoot, Brooke, that didn't last long at all, so don't feel bad.
Like I'm sure delegating to her lasted real long. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or like it's hard to criticize your wife's work, to be honest with you, right? Like that's a challenging thing. But I mean,
you have to you have to tread slowly with that. You have to be careful with your conversations. Working with your spouse could be a whole nother podcast, but it's it's been great. I mean, she's so incredible at the stuff that I suck at. Like right now, she's on with one of our VAs talking about some tax stuff on the listings, and like I'm doing this stuff. Like this is what I love to do, but she's so detailed to where she catches everything. I'm bringing on more partners, and she's like revising a contract, but I hate doing that stuff. So you have to kind of be in the right role, and I think that's how you don't get burnt out. So that's been big for us.
I think there's two parts to what you said there, and I'm all for complementary skill sets, and we've talked about that 1,000 times in the book, and that came up all the time. If you have the right people, I'm sure like EOS and the visionary integrator, we talked about that ad nauseum. But it's the fact doing it with a spouse, I think, is the extra challenge. But hey, look, it sounds like it's worked with you all, and hats off to both of you. Congratulations. I just don't know.
Knock on wood. I don't want this conversation to ruin anything, but it's worked great so far. So we'll see how the next couple of years go.
Oh no, I mean, there's so many husband-wife duos in this business, Brooke, that we met over the years that are crushing it. You know what I mean? I've done it for a long time. So, don't take our failures, personally. Yes. Awesome. All right, number 7, switching to a more bit of the tactical kind of property experience side of things. Number 7, not bringing our cleaning team in-house or negotiating a rev share earlier. I don't know if I've heard the rev share comment much. Certainly I've heard some of the in-house cleaning stuff. So I'd love to hear your perspective today. How are you doing cleaning currently on the operation side of things?
Yeah, so we've tried just about everything. We did independent contractors, then we switched to some in-house, and then we went back to independent contractors. And I think we're still finding that perfect mix as we grow, because it's almost like we bring on 10 more properties, and then there's another challenge logistically that we have to figure out. So I'm not going to sit here and say that like we've got it figured out, but I think we have a pretty good process just because there's so many moving parts. We have to have like everything pretty dialed in. So currently we use a hybrid of both of them, and that allows us to control quality. Like that's the biggest thing, because it is really challenging once you get over 100 properties to like keep the superhost status and keep really good reviews, because you kind of sacrifice growth or quality. So that's something that we never wanted to do. So, we put a lot of training into the cleaning teams. What we currently do right now is a split that really makes sense. So we, the way that we kind of look at it is we use a lot of independent contractors still. And then we'll do just a margin off the top. So we feed them all of the business. They don't have to market for anything. We provide them all the resources. We provide them training, and they're like family to us. But it gives us an opportunity to, because we're essentially running a cleaning team. It gives us an opportunity to take a little bit of a margin, and we can hire with that. We could do more marketing with that, because it's a symbiotic relationship. Like we bring on more properties, then they never have to market again, and they're always going to be fed, and they can support their teams. And that is, that's important to us. I mean, we have an obligation to grow, and because we're supporting a lot of cleaning teams. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. And I guarantee in 6 months to a year, we're probably going to change something again as the market changes.
I've heard a couple people actually go this strategy, and it sounds a little bit similar to what you do, where it's a little bit of that hybrid approach where they have their core in-house team where, they're really, really good. They can keep them busy year round. But then as like the market fluctuates, as, seasonality fluctuates, they can kind of bring in those contract cleaners and do it. It allows the business to flex and scale, but it's still at the same time not have this huge, payroll, hanging over you. I don't know if you've had any success or if that's how you do it, Andrew.
Yeah, it's and it's such a balancing act, and I don't think there's no right answer, because every company does something different, and it works really well for their culture and kind of what they're building. But I'm not naive to that it's an extremely tough business. Like cleaning sucks. The cleaning business is tough. I think we're a little extra sympathetic to them, because whenever we started the business, like we were making the transition from our W-2 jobs, and we were cleaning our own vacation rentals, my wife and myself. So like I've done all of that. I've cleaned everything. I've deep cleaned houses. We've done all the inventory. Like we know how it works, and we know how tough of a job it is. So we also know what they go through on a daily basis. So yeah, it's important to treat them right. And also hiring is so tough in that business. So we have to be mindful of that, to where if we have a core team that's doing really well, let's treat them really well and keep them, with us as long as possible. But we also know the reality that people turn over so quickly in this business. So we can't rely on just one team, because their entire team could be gone tomorrow because somebody else reached out and is paying $10 more. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah. What about in-house laundry? We've had a lot of people recently have said that was one of their biggest mistakes, was not launching that in-house laundry sooner.
So that is not something that we've dove into yet. Kind of scares me a little bit logistically. I think it's something that could be profitable as you get a little bit bigger, but it's also like going into new technology whenever you have 200 properties. Like, I should have done it 2 years ago. We've been super fortunate because, very similar to owners, like, I set expectations really hard on the front end. And that's kind of the perks of building a brand. Like, I don't have to reach out to cleaning teams. Oftentimes they'll reach out to us. We can vet people, see if they're a good fit. And because they want to work with them, because we always feed them properties and they don't have to market for anything, that we can tell them, like, hey, here's our expectations. You're going to do linens. You're going to bring it back. Here's the process. And they don't know anything different. So actually all of our cleaning teams, like, they do all of the linen process right now. Which is extra work, but they also get paid more as well. So yeah, we haven't dove into that yet. That might be something in the future. That's a whole nother beast, I've heard.
Yes, it is. But I'm happy to introduce you to a handful of people that mentioned that as one of their top 10 mistakes, was not doing it soon enough, because they said the money was really, really good.
Absolutely. I'd love that bridge.
Yeah, I know, Brooke, some people have said too that it ends up being profitable. Like, they not only do they end up saving money on, like, oh, we're not paying as much for this side of it, but they're like, oh, I can do it for my quote unquote competitors as well, or like other local hosts and things like that. And then they end up actually turning into a profit center. So I've heard some clients say similar things in the past. Yeah. All right, number 8 then, just kind of moving along in that direction. That's a different one too. Andrew, I'm curious kind of your perspective on this, but not taking owner decisions or actions personally. At the end of the day, it's they're making those decisions what are best for their family. So what's kind of the philosophy behind this one, treating that reaction that the owner might have?
So this is still hard to this day. I will say that, because we don't have thousands and thousands of inventory. So every owner that does leave, if they decide to sell a house, or maybe they're frustrated about a certain situation, we do take it very personal, just because we're so close with all of our owners. But one thing that I always kind of think back on is one of my previous jobs before we started the company. I was an account manager for a marketing company, and we worked with a lot of service-based businesses. So roofers, commercial cleaners, kind of people within that space. And the entire day I would run account management calls. So we're talking about their book of business. We're going through all the metrics, all that good stuff. And we had someone that was canceling, and I was trying to save them from canceling. And he was like, Andrew, have you ever tried to make payroll for your team when there's no money? I was like, no, I can't really relate to that. So that's something I always think back on, is that it's not personal. There's always a decision that they're making for their family. I mean, we've had owners have to sell the homes because they're going through a divorce. And I think, no, I don't want you to lose that property. Like, please stay in our program a little bit longer. But there's something that they're dealing with on their end, or maybe there's something happening with their family, or maybe they need to sell because their finances are different. So that's what I always try to remind myself. But it is, it's tough. I mean, we never want anybody to leave. We're very guarded with all of our inventory. We want to keep everybody in the program, but these people have lives just like we do. And it's not always a personal decision.
I'm there with you, man. It's like anytime a partner in Vintory churns, it pains me. It hurts me so badly. And I just want to pick up the phone and just kind of plead with them, like, what is going on, But this came up that there was a handful of people that said the same thing. And I think Valerie Hawkins kind of was pretty much in alignment with you. It sounds like you guys were sitting next to each other at a bar talking about this, but she said she regretted, taking criticism personally, as in an owner complaint or a notice to cancel their contract, rather than the experience really is just as feedback and problem solving. And, Sarah Bradford talked about the same thing. And, I like Lino, though. I think I ended the book with Lino's comment with Scenic Stays. He said, don't take yourself too seriously. You are selling vacation rentals, for heaven's sake,
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, whenever I try to think about this stuff, and, sometimes it hurts us, like, we do take it personal, even if somebody's buying a beach home and they drop $300,000 to get that investment, and it's for their family. And then maybe they're giving us feedback on how they want things done. Like, you have every right to do that. Like, it's such an emotional connection. And I think that's one thing in this business, because we want to keep every, piece of inventory that we don't often think about, but they're going through personal shit as well. So it's not always like, oh, we don't like you, or, we're trying to be mean to you or anything like that. Like maybe they have something terrible happen in their life and they snapped on someone. Same with guests. And that's just like what we have to constantly remind ourselves.
Yeah. I've always said this to my team as well, Andrew, because I mean, in a way, like our business models are actually somewhat similar on this call, right? With the way that we interact with like our customers, or, you're dealing with homeowners, we're dealing with the clients. It's kind of the same thing at the end of the day. I'm like, I always say to our clients, it's their only business. That's their baby. That's what they want to focus on. They want to grow it. They're leveraging us to hopefully, get some results in the guest marketing side of things. Certainly with Vintory, they're leveraging that to get homeowner marketing results. But, certainly to the agency side or to the services side of things, yes, you are one of, 50 or one of 60 or one of 200 or 300 clients. It's always a little bit tricky, like to kind of figure out that balance, especially when your team's looking at it. So that's always just what I remind my team is like, to that person who spent $300,000 of their hard-earned money to buy a vacation rental property in Jacksonville, to them that may have been a decade of saving, 2 decades of saving. And if they feel like that property is not being cared for well, or isn't, there's something wrong with it, to them that's super, like you said, it's super personal or feels a certain way. And yes, to you it is one of 180 homes in your program, so you kind of have to like figure out what's the balance there of both sides of it. But I always just try to like have the perspective that they might have in that moment of like, I'm reaching out to this company who's supposed to be doing this for me. If it's not done perfectly, or if it's not done exactly the way I want to, I'm going to be unhappy. And I just try to, put myself in their shoes or have a little empathy, even if sometimes what they're saying is unreasonable, or we can't do it, or we don't want to do it. I at least try to sit there for a moment and be like, how could I best handle this? Or is there a way for me to handle this? Or sometimes, I don't know how you feel about this too, Andrew, it's maybe about setting expectations. Maybe they expected to get XYZ and they got ABC, and then they're upset. And I was like, well, we've had to do this recently. I actually did a kickoff call right before this recording, and I reminded the client, like, this is what this includes. And I kind of had to say it a little aggressively almost, but I'm like, this, to be very clear, we're not doing this when we're doing this, and I think the person was like, okay, understand, but I've not said that before. And then I've got myself in hot water later because, the client misunderstood what we were actually agreeing to or something like that. So I don't know your reaction to that idea, Andrew, which is also about expectations, because then what they expect is what they get. They're going to be a little bit happier, even if it's something that you can or cannot actually do any given day or week or month or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think they respect you more, and they trust you more whenever you are super upfront on expectations. I mean, we try our best to, do that a ton, even when a property's coming into a program, or let's say they're already on board and we're talking about, hey, here's some of the damages that you could potentially see. Like, this just is the business. And I think one thing that, us as managers were really bad about is we get relatively unemotional because we've seen everything. Like a ceiling could fall in and I wouldn't bat an eye. I would just say, okay, here's what we need to do to get it fixed, where that could be that person's entire world. And I think that's one thing that we have to be more mindful of, but set expectations on it. Like, hey, this could happen, but there's not anything that's not replaceable. So here's how we're going to solve it. And I think as long as you're upfront, whether it's somebody coming into a program or, they're talking about like, oh, I don't want people to damage my house, just tell them the reality of it and just be super honest. And I think people respect you more for that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're getting close to the end here on the list, Andrew. So we really appreciate your time and you being with us. So number 10 is building out. Oh, I'm sorry. Correct. I'm sorry about that. Rewind here a little bit. My bad. I skipped number 9, which I shouldn't have, because this one is near and dear to my heart. My mistake here. Number 9, not building out a direct booking strategy from day one and putting dollars into driving brand awareness. So tell me a little bit, Andrew, about what you're doing today on direct bookings. How are you driving more of that demand for your brand and for Joseph Allen?
So we have such a long path ahead of us with direct bookings, but I think we've made a decent dent. We're probably 25-30% direct, to where we started with nothing. And it just takes so long to build that data and build a brand. So as far as direct bookings, like, we're starting to do more paid stuff. We're starting to retarget people through email campaigns, and especially it all comes down to the brand that you build. And I think that's something that we've put, a ton of money into is, we're always posting on social. We're always showcasing our properties. We're always doing marketing videos. We're always, doing stuff in the community or with our owners. The brand opens up so many doors once you build it. Like to reverse, whenever I was talking about cleaning teams, where like, I don't really have to search for anyone. People reach out, we can vet them and then give them a good opportunity. It's because we've built a brand in the community. We get so many organic leads of people just in our real estate network that want us to manage their homes, because we're always putting out content, and they trust us because we're putting out videos and stuff like that. And then same with, our team, whenever we're hiring, it's because we've kind of built a brand. And then that all ties into direct bookings and just being super consistent. It's such a grind to get people to know about you. And it's something you have to do every single day. And I think the biggest thing that we see, I was having a conversation with someone, a client that's actually coming on, and we were talking about like our local real estate network, where you see people that are hot and heavy for 6 months and they completely fall off. You just have to be consistent. Like, even if it is slow, continue to put out the blog posts, continue to put out, posts about the properties that you're launching, maybe testimonials and stuff like that. I think that's the most important thing. And it's just it's a compounding effect with direct bookings. But boy, we have a ways to go, but we're kind of inching at it every single day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like this is a commonality between whether you're doing guest marketing or owner marketing is, again, going back to that principle of consistency. You just have to be consistent and just keep sticking with it, even when you don't think it. And we always have this chart that we show all of our partners. It's called the Valley of Disappointment, where people are just, they're doing so much, they're doing so much work, and then they finally give up. And then that's exactly when they'd be coming out of that trough, and it actually, don't think of it as wasted energy. Think of it as that you're storing that energy, every one of those touch points. But obviously this is Conrad's wheelhouse, more so than mine. But there's a quote I heard somebody say one time. It says, if you don't have a direct booking philosophy or strategy, with vacation rentals, he's like, you really don't have a business. You have a job. And Brian Chesky is your boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think my take on this, Andrew, obviously I could do a whole hour on this, so I won't, to be respectful of your time and things like that, is that ultimately it's the brand awareness is the best thing you can have. And there's so many bookings that happen when you go look at analytics later on that are direct bookings. By direct, I mean they went directly to the website and made a reservation. And it's so challenging. And it's one thing that I wish I could do, and I just can't do it, to attribute where they actually came from. Because like I've always say this, right? No one's going to wake up tomorrow, go to josephellenproperties.com and then make a reservation without some marketing event preceding that, and it could be one of many things, back to your point from a second ago, email, an ad you ran before, a social media post you had happen before, all these things, or just the natural like snowball effect over time of guests that have stayed with you before, or a friend recommending, oh yeah, I went back to Jacksonville when I stayed with these guys, check them out when you go to look for it. And one of the healthiest things that I see when I go look at a company's analytics, I open Search Console and I look, how many people search for the name of this company every month, or the name of some of their most popular listings. And that's such a great health sign for like direct bookings, because if they're seeking out your company specifically, then you're on the right track. Then some of the branding and marketing efforts you're doing are actually tangibly turning into branded search volume. And that's what typically converts best in analytics. So yeah, it's always a long journey. The buckets that we talk about on the other podcast that I do with search, social, and email is where you make the most, hay on the digital marketing side. But to your point, there's so many physical things that you can do in the community, all these other, branded things. We had a client who wrapped their trucks recently and they put a QR code on the trucks, and like that QR code is getting like 100 scans a month, you know what I mean, for people scanning that QR code on a truck. So that's like help contributing to their marketing, even though it's not in this digital world. So yeah, so many things there, but again,
it's such a 5 to 10 year play whenever it comes to like building a brand and direct bookings. It's because I've had jobs in the past where all we did was sales, the whole thing where it takes 8 touch points to get somebody on the phone, like blah, 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 that you've heard in the past. It's the same thing with direct bookings. Like they just need to see you all the time. For us to do like an ad campaign and expect a ton of people to book from just that single one, it's probably not going to happen, and it's not realistic. But it's where they see it and they're top of mind, and then they see it again a couple weeks later and they see it a month down the road. I mean, it's also a very tough thing to stay consistent with, because you think like nothing is ever working, but it's kind of like the billboard effect, right? You just have to consistently be doing it all the time.
Yeah. There's something called the marketing rule of 7, right? Where I think it was invented by the movie industry in like the 1950s. And it says that it takes an average of 7 touch points for somebody actually recognizes the brand that you're trying to do. So yeah, go back to that, just constantly be in front of them.
I mean, it's just, I think about it as me as a consumer as well. Like I'll get hit with Facebook ads, and whether it's like buying a pair of shoes or, a book that you see from a Facebook ad, or, getting retargeted through a website, you don't buy it the first time, but it's after you've seen it for like 2 months in a row. So I kind of think, okay, how do I operate as a consumer? And then that's what we try to put into our business, because it is such a long grind whenever it comes to direct bookings and just building a brand in whole.
Yeah. My wife and I know, Brooke, you did an Italy trip this year as well. My wife and I did our Italy trip a little bit before yours. And that was, I kid you not, 10 years in the making. It was for our 10-year wedding anniversary, Andrew. And we had planned that trip like when we were getting married, like we're going to go to Italy one day. And then our 10-year anniversary camp finally had the means to do it. And then we did it. So I'm like, the touch point from like wanting to go to actually going was literally 10 years. I mean, granted, we didn't look at hotels and things like that way back in 2014, but it was like that same mindset was what it actually took. Yeah.
Everyone's buy cycle is a little different.
Yeah, exactly. That was an extreme example, but I'm with you on that one. All right, let me try to fire the 10th one properly this time. My mistake from a second ago. All right, number 10, build out the tech for your company. You want to be, not the company you are at the time. We kind of touched on this earlier, but what tech you choose actually amplifies your growth. And it's no fun changing, for example, a PMS at 140 properties or adding in new tech when you're larger and have 200 properties, that sort of thing. So what's kind of your current tech stack? Maybe if you can go into some detail, that could be interesting. And then what are some tech tools maybe that you're using now that you maybe wish you had earlier or something like that? What are some lessons you've learned on picking those right tools and technology?
Yeah, this one hits home because I went through it and it sucked. I think we made a transition at like 100 properties or around that range. Logistically, it was such a nightmare. I feel like I almost, if I were to do it again, I would need a team of like 10 VAs to kind of get me through that entire transition. But it's tough because, as a business owner, you have a vision, but you don't exactly know what's going to happen. So it's really tough to, build everything out to the company that you want to be. But Brooke, you had a perfect point with the book that you had mentioned is like map it out and reverse engineer from that point. If I were to do things again, I would have done that a little bit better because I knew we were going to grow and I had a vision of what we're building the company into, but I didn't expect at one point to have, 10 or 15 properties coming on in a month. We didn't know that was going to happen until we started doing some marketing and building the brand. So I would definitely go back. I would build out all the technology that we wanted to have with the company that we were going to grow into. And then currently we use Hostfully for our PMS. It's great for our size. We like it. We use Wheelhouse. Obviously, we're a partner of Vintory with our owner acquisition. And then just a handful of other things that we're building out now. So building out a CRM, we've built one out within Monday.com, and we have our entire team on Slack. And the tough thing is there's just so many pieces of technology and there's so much shiny object syndrome happening in this industry that it's tough to kind of nail down a couple things. But yeah, that's kind of what it looks like right now.
I actually use your quote, Andrew, all the time. It's like build out your tech for the company you want to be, not the company you are at the time. And I think this is you're the one that says this one all the time. So I'm giving you credit right now. Like find that company that's like one rung above you, one step ahead of you, and then just look at what they're doing. You know what I mean? Because that's where you're going to be, especially if you're a fast growing company. And a shameless plug for my latest book, The Ultimate Tech Stack Guide, where there's a list of all the top.
Is it shameless if it's your podcast, bro? Whatever your podcast is.
You know me, I'm always help, not sell. But it is the Ultimate Tech Stack Guide, the tools and software that power the top vacation rental managers. So this is where I surveyed 55 of the top leaders in the space and asked them to share their tech stacks. And then we kind of put it into a book and a survey. So you can get it now on Amazon, or you can email me directly, and I'll be glad to mail you a copy for free.
Yeah, no, I think it's a broader conversation, right, too, Brooke, about like choosing, and so many clients we've worked with, a lot of them, I can't really think of two companies that I work with, and some of them are quite large, that have the same tech stack. So everyone has a different philosophy, everyone has a different way that they do things, and it's like a car. Like there's no one perfect car. Depending on what you want, depending on the job it's doing, depending on your budget, all these things, you may prefer one over the other. So I guess that's the way I think about it for sure at a high level. Well, also,
Brooke, I think to switch things up whenever you're a little bit bigger. So get that tech stack in order now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's like multiple root canals. I think that's something you said before, Brooke, like multiple root canals in the same day to switch PMSs when you're big. So.
It's two root canals a week. And our goal is to make it one root canal a week,
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, Brooke, I think you got one more question for Andrew here before we put a bow on this one.
I do. So, Andrew, if you could go back in time to your 25-year-old self and get a little bit of advice, what would it be?
That's such a great question. So if I had to go back, I think I would have started a little bit sooner. So I played college basketball, and that was my life for a while. And then I tore my knee my junior year. And then I probably partied too much in the years after that. And then I started to get serious about business and learning whenever I was finished with my MBA. And then I actually met my wife, and we kind of had the same interests, and we had the idea to start this business. But I always think back, because I know some people that have started when they're a little bit younger, and I feel like I would be that much further ahead. I think, for a period of time, I was probably just a little bit lost with my competitiveness, because all I did was play. Like if you play a college sport, that's the only thing that you could do. And then you have this freedom where you don't have that thing that you're doing every single day. And it's not like playing a pro sport, but it was important to me. And then I got to a point where, okay, I like this business thing. And I kind of redirected my competitiveness, but I wish I would have done it a couple years earlier, because it's really exciting to think like where the business would be. But I guess everything happens for a reason.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. Awesome. Well, you know what feels good, Andrew, when you take a shot and it hits nothing but net and it's just the rim isn't even touched? You know what else feels good? People that leave a review for the podcast. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, you got to leave us a review. Go to your podcast app of choice. iTunes, Spotify is where we get the most downloads. Therefore, we appreciate reviews there the most, but we'll take a review anywhere. Andrew, thanks so much for hopping on. We really appreciate it. We'll put some links in the show notes to your LinkedIn profile, your website. And if people are heading your way, they should definitely stay with you. It sounds like you've built a good operation and we look forward to learning more and seeing more in the future. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And we'll catch everybody on the next episode.